you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Dawn Simmons, and I am the Director of Programs for Stage Source. I have my handy cards here because they are going to remind me of a few things, and then we'll get started. So I want to just take a moment to give special thanks to Chris Robinson and Leah Norman. They are ASL interpreters for the evening, and they are fantastic. We hope that you guys will come back. January 23rd, we'll be in building number 64 for If I Knew Then, featuring actors. Our actors will be DeLon Grant, Will Lyman, Mariana Basham, and Tim Smith. And we thank Cambridge Center for Adult Education for hosting again. For those of you who do sort of behind-the-scenes theater work, I just want to remind you that REPA is coming up February 18th. That's a Saturday, location to be determined. And the annual auditions, for those of you that are, again, all of my hybrids in here, April 2nd, 3rd, and 9th. They're going to be at the Boston Center for the Arts again. Thank you, John J. King, for hooking us up with that. Also, we have coming up in next week, Stage Source is holding its first open house on the 19th. That's Monday from 2 to 5. We're going to be doing a duplicate script giveaway. Some of you who are familiar with us know that when we get extra scripts, we like to give them away, and you can kind of come in at any time and pick those up. However, we're going to be doing a special open house so that you can see our brand new library. It's just really gorgeous, tons and tons of books. And so we'll do a script giveaway. You get a chance to see our new sort of library/community center, and check out any other books that you're willing or that you're interested in looking at. All right, I think that's it for me. Without further ado, I'm gonna bring our playwrights up, and we'll get started. Thanks, guys.
So, hi everybody, good evening. Hi. My name is MJ Halberstadt. I've been asked to moderate this evening. I'm very, very excited to be among these playwrights. So, as many of you know, the conceit is to bring conversations between amateurs and professionals. And tonight I'm the amateur. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our professionals. Sitting directly to my left is Rick Park. If you want to say a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Rick.
Well, you have the bio, so you know all the dirty details. And then, of course, Ginger Lazarus, and then Kirsten Greenwich. So, list of questions. We're going to get through as many as we can. For about 45 minutes, we're going to go with the pre-written questions, and then after that point, we'll start taking some questions from the audience. So if any questions start popping up, maybe write them down, and you'll have an opportunity to ask those later. So since we are in Boston, we're going to start off by talking a little bit about Boston's specific opportunities and challenges. So take it away with challenges and opportunities specific to Boston.
Ladies.
Well, I guess one wonderful thing about Boston is that it is there's a vibrant theater community here. When I first graduated from college, when I first started learning how to be a playwright, there was a lot of opportunities for me to hear my work read, to meet other playwrights, to do meet and greets, and also to start interjecting into the national scene as well. Just in terms of, I think back then I was involved with the Dramatists Guild through Boston, which is obviously based in New York. And then there were also lots of places to be able to have readings and see my work up. I started off in the Playwrights platform arena, and that was invaluable to me in terms of learning how to get my work seen and get my work read and have an audience for it. So that was wonderful about being in Boston. And I'm from Boston, so I don't know if they can kick me out. It's like, this is just where I'm probably going to live for a very long time. So it wasn't really a choice of Boston or somewhere else necessarily. I knew I'd probably live here even after college and after grad school.
Yeah, I would say similar things. I mean, I think that there are, the way I'm from here too, so kind of the same inertia that Kirsten's talking about. But what kept me, from fleeing somewhere else out of desperation is that There are a lot of, I think the community of playwrights is pretty strong here. I mean, there's a lot of us. There are many long-standing playwright-centered groups like Playwrights Platform and Write On at Set to Stage, and Shadowboxing has been along for a long time, although I think they've kind of gone in and out. But that was also how I plugged in and started meeting other playwrights and finding ways to get work read, and Kirsten and I both eventually ended up joining a Rhombus, another playwrights group that came out of some of these older groups. So it seems like playwrights have ways to find each other and develop their work, and there are great opportunities like Playwrights Platform out there that has a festival every summer and things like that, for emerging playwrights to start getting their work on stage. And the fringe, I think the fringe scene of the smaller theaters scene in Boston is really strong. They keep popping up, and they may or may not do new work, but a surprising number of them do, or have approached it, or there's a couple that are actually devoted to new work, and that's pretty exciting. And there's, in general, there's, even if there aren't loads of theaters who are actually doing new work, there's a lot going on in Boston just to experience theater, in terms of theater that you can go see. And so, of course, that's an important part of your development as a playwright. That's been really crucial.
I started out as an actor. I went to Emerson and got my degree in acting. So I stayed in Boston just because I knew that it was Boston, and I didn't want to go to New York because I'm lazy. New York just says you have to be able to sell yourself in a way that I was not ready to market myself. And I think I'm relatively new at writing. No, I'm not, but I am, because I started writing back when I was 18 or 19 in college, but in Boston, it's been a while. It took me a while to sort of get a foothold in, and mine came through the Boston Theater Marathon, which does 50 10-minute plays every spring, and I sort of got a play in that. And I was like, oh. And once you have your first play done, you're like, oh. And then you start finding other things to write, and then it just has sort of grown, and it's fun. So it's very odd for me to write anything longer than 10 minutes. For the longest time, that's all I wrote were 10-minute plays, and then I wrote, with a friend of mine, we wrote the superhero monologues, which was nice, because it was just 8 monologues, monologues are fine to write. I love writing monologues. And now I'm in the BU playwriting MFA program, and just had a play that I finished last night at 12:45 and read today. And it's the weirdest feeling to hear people read your words, and you think, oh, God. But what I love about Boston is that there are these actors that I know because I've acted with them, or something like that, Salvador. And you start writing for people, and we were just talking about a woman who was who read part of my play today, Cheryl McMahon, who was just brilliant on it. And I was like, I wrote part of the script that involved Liza Minnelli showing up. And I said, Cheryl, you're just going to read Liza Minnelli as fast as you can. And she found so many things that were funny that I was like, it's really not that funny. But she's like, so I love writing from actors that I know. And so, that's, if you get out there and start seeing things, you can, think of the actors that inspire you to write what you want to write. And I think Boston has a lot of really good actors.
So that provides a lot of really good reasons to stay in Boston. And part of, one of my favorite things about being in Boston is certainly the fringe community. I'm going to point out Jesse Baxter over there, who has just started a theater, or helped start a theater company called Freshing Theater, which is developing a brand new play, and I believe that's part of the mission statement throughout the company. Now, a lot of mid-sized theaters, which are so much fun to go see, they aren't doing that as much. So how can we as playwrights engage artistic directors and producers of these mid-sized theater companies and help try to steer them into the play development, or new play development and new play production?
That's a tough question.
I think for me, I just send all my stuff that I write to people that I know that run companies. I mean, I have a certain, as an actor, I have a certain, I've worked with enough people that I can write to them and just say, can you read this and let me know? And I do it to people who aren't necessarily artistic directors, or people that just might have someone's ear at some point. And I think both John and Dawn got a play that I wrote, and I just said, just tell me what you think about this. And I try to get it out to everybody, because I don't know who's going to say, who's going to be in a meeting with someone, and I'm like, boy, I wish we had a play that involved serial killers. And you know, sometimes, oh, I read this play. So to me, it's using any connections that you can find, even the weird ones that may not, you know, anyone may not have. But I don't, you know, I think that's just getting as many people to read what you write without being annoying is the key. Because it will be annoying to get them all the time.
I mean, and finding, not just in Boston, but nationally too, finding theaters that do the types of plays that you write. So that was the advice that I got a lot when I was first starting to write plays, and I was like, whatever, I'm just going to send it to whoever I want. And I didn't realize that those theaters might not have an audience for my particular play. It's not that you don't want to, you know, break new barriers and have a whole new great fantastic life and giving it to theaters that might not have read it ordinarily. But theaters that are accustomed to doing, you know, if you're writing plays that are black box style plays, if you keep sending them to plays that have big proscenium houses, they probably aren't going to get down there. And it's not because they don't like you, and it's not because they don't like your play. They might think you're a fantastic playwright. It's because your play that was made for a smaller house, was made for a 150-seater, isn't going to play in a 900-seat theater. And that's just a reality of the type of work you're doing. So then go out and find 20 theaters that have that black box 150-person theater and send it to all those people. Then again, you know, you might want to canvas and see who their audiences are. Tailor what you send to each person. Have a whole arsenal of plays that you're going to send out, as opposed to just that one play. It's like, this is my baby. And if you keep sending your baby out and get rejected, you're not going to feel good about your baby or yourself. So have, like, you know, be like the Duggar lady who has 20 kids. Send one out. It doesn't matter if they're not there overnight. You know, you've got all these other people to love, or kids to love, players to love. So you need to. I think that was a huge breakthrough moment for me. Is finding theaters that would be responsive to me sending the work instead of getting rejections all the time. Because if you keep sending it to those big houses, they're not only going to reject you, but they're not always going to ask to see your next play, because they know your next play might not fit in their theater. But if you send it to someone, it's not quite a right fit for that season, or they don't have a reading series it can plug you into, but they still want to see your next play because you've shown them that you're attentive to their needs as a theater company. And you can start a relationship. I think that's the biggest thing, is having relationships with theaters and artistic directors and designers and directors. Someone who can say, I just finished this play, and a director can take it to an artistic director and say, I really want to work on this. Artistic directors are beholden to not just what they want. They don't just come and have a board and, you know, a theater and say, I just want to do what I want to do. They're beholden to board members, their staff, a literary manager who's going to help them create their season. So learning how to make relationships with people in the theater was a big, huge thing. And playwrights, writers often aren't the most gregarious people. Often are. Sometimes people are. And they're like, hey, look at me, I'm a writer. But oftentimes we're the person in the corner, like, with a notebook, like, sometimes.
They really want to. I mean, you don't want to, you know, you want, I mean, you want they want what you are giving them, and you want what they are
A mutual understanding.
A mutual understanding and something mutually beneficial. So, and something that is going to, so that there can be, you want a relationship with good communication, so that, you know, the artistic director is really actually interested in bringing your vision to the stage and is passionately behind that, and that is not trying to mold it into something else, like trying to fit it into trying to sort of squeeze it into a slot,
a square peg in a round hole.
And you don't want to, so, and you know, the artistic director doesn't want to feel like they're doing the playwright a favor, because
then it's at the expense of their season, of their company.
Yeah. So it's really got to be something mutually beneficial, and hopefully something that's going to go on for a long time. I mean, that this play is going to help further the company's mission and further your reputation, and in a good way, and that they'll and that the company can then build on that, maybe by producing another play of yours a couple years down the road, or producing the work of another local playwright. So, yeah.
You want someone who is excited
by
what you write, and can get that, you know, and because we all want someone to say, wow, that's good, you know, and to find someone that you can write for, and then that makes you excited to work with them to make changes or just adjustments or something. So I always want to find someone who likes what I'm doing, who understands my brain, which is, as MJ knows, as my classmate, isn't always normal. But I always want to find that person who's excited by what I do, by my place.
I also think in terms of connect yourself to the theater, you want to find who at the theater is a really good reader. Sometimes artistic directors aren't the best readers of plays, and sometimes they're great readers. So you want to find out, is the literary manager the person who we should be sending the play to first? Who has the artistic director's ear and saying, oh, I read this play and it's really great. Or I read this play by a new person and it has a lot of problems, but we should still pay attention to this person. So finding out who at the theater is going to be reading the plays, and try to maybe you know, when I was with the NEA-TCG, I had an NEA-TCG grant, and one of the things I said I wanted to do was to sit in on script reading meetings at Woolly Mammoth. And so I got to do that for like 6 months, and Howard Shawitz, who was the artistic director of that theater, and they do new work in DC. Their whole season is basically new work, or maybe a second production of a play, and then they also bring in shows. And so if you ever go to DC, you should check them out. You should also just try and get a relationship going with them, because not only do they do new work, but they because they have do new work, they get a lot of grants. They have a lot of money coming in, where usually, maybe not in this economy, I don't know that for sure, but 5 years ago they did. And they were really skilled at writing grants for new work, and that's how they were able to get the money to do it, because they're a relatively small theater company. They just moved to a big space, but it took them 30 years to get that space. It's beautiful, but 30 years of doing new plays and getting really great reviews, and then really getting really crappy reviews. So I sat in on their meetings, and Howard, they didn't have a literary manager that year. Their literary manager was this woman named Mary Wiesing, who now has another theater company down there. You should also check out hers. I can't remember. Oh gosh, I'm remembering it as it comes down my email, but I can't remember the name of it off my tongue. And she went off to Prague to do some studying for a year, so they were left with nobody, and that was my contact person when they approached me about coming to them. And so I was still going to sit in on these meetings, and they just had these two interns, me, a board member who said he liked to read scripts, and and because they do so much new work, they had like an entire bookcase filled with new plays, and we were supposed to read a play a day for like 5 months. It was insane. I didn't get any writing done, but I learned how Howard would hold these meetings and what he discussed and what points. And he was really busy. He's fundraising. I think he had just come off directing a show. He's preparing for the next show he's directing, because his directors direct also. So it was really eye-opening in that the key to getting your read work by Howard, unless he happened to, your play happened to be in his staff, was to make sure that it was going to get through this round of people who weren't him. And he didn't happen to have a literary manager that year. And so it was really interesting. You got to make sure, these are small things I learned. It was like, make sure your play is readable, single spaced, on a really tiny font, just so that it can be 90 pages instead of the 150 that you didn't cut down to 90 or whatever. It makes a difference. It was just like, oh God, I've got a whole bunch of these to get through before January, because Howard wants a short list by January of what he can look at for next season. So it was little stupid things like that I realized, oh my God, this stuff matters. I was just like, oh, I write it and I'll just send it off. And so I started to be a lot more careful after that. How I wanted people to read my stage directions and read the stuff before. I used to write these elaborate set design things and character descriptions a la O'Neill or even August Wilson. And we just don't live in that kind of world anymore. Everything's shorthand. And it has to, unless that thing is like a Pulitzer Prize winning script description, you better cut that. People probably don't want to read it, and people aren't going to get, you're not going to get past page 5. That old dictum that, like, if you don't have what happens to page 10 and they're going to put it down, is really true. Even though I'm a playwright whose things often don't happen until page 15, I've realized. So you've got to have a way, if that's going to be you, how are you going to get that person to read past those 10 pages when nothing seems like they're happening? I write often a lot of subtext and stuff. So I was like, how am I going to do that without changing who I am and how I write? And because I think that's an integral part of my work, is that subtextual way. And I'm not the kind of person like, there's a murder on page 1, let's keep going. Some writers are like that. And I can guarantee that if they do that in the first 5 pages, your play is probably going to get read quicker than someone who writes differently than them. So learning how to make your play savvy so that someone wants to get past. I'd always thought that 10-page rule was just BS. Like, of course, why would people do that? That's horrible. And it's just, they don't have time to sit there with 50 scripts in a month and read those types of things. So,
It sounds like that was a rewarding and helpful experience.
Rewarding. Oh my God.
Can we continue to name drop then about our favorite development opportunities and festivals and anything that we've been part of that has helped us along?
In Boston, obviously I mentioned Boston Playwrights and, not Boston Playwrights, the Boston Theater Marathon, but also I've been lucky enough in the past 3 years to be involved in the tea plays, which are by Mill 6, which is a totally different weirdism of having to write. If you haven't seen it, you get assigned a tea line, 2 actors, and a director, and you get that like at 8 o'clock on Friday night, and by 5 o'clock the next day, you have a full 10-minute play that then goes into rehearsal to be performed on Tuesday. So it's really fast, and that's a great, if you can get it. It's a hard thing. Dawn and Patrick and John and I have all done it, and it's kind of crazy, but with me? Yes.
Yeah.
That's how good it is.
That's how fast it is.
Well, we never see each other. And
I never saw you guys.
I think I send, because I do a lot of 10-minute play stuff, and I send it to, there's the, I can't remember anything. You can tell I was up till 12:30. There's a lot of things online that you get, what's Gary Garrison's? The Loop gets you information on different festivals, and I've just sent things out, and I'm kind of a rock star out in Racine, Wisconsin for 2 plays that I wrote that got 1st and 2nd place 2 years back to back. Have nothing to do, I don't know, but they're all my friends on Facebook. Never met these people, but I didn't submit one last year, and people were asking where I was. And I'm like, what? This is weird. But you never know where you're gonna find someone who wants your stuff. And so I send it to any 10-minute plays. I send it out to, if it fits the bill, I will send it. So I think for shorter plays, just send them out. Just keep sending them. Wait for that email to come back and say, yeah, we want it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that market for shorter plays, that just getting submissions and the there's a wealth of 10-minute play festivals out there. And certainly some here in Boston, just the Boston Theater Marathon, which is open to anybody, and Slam Boston series, which does 10-minute plays in a slam competition form, poetry slam. Are there still any other 10-minute play? Is there still one?
Playwrights platform.
Playwrights platform,
Every year,
yeah.
Image Theater up in Lowell, we produced over 60 playwrights in 5 years. So
Yes.
we're doing, so we're doing a festival for women. It'll be our second year called Femme Noir, and we're doing it at the Whistler House Museum of Art, and surrounded by art, all done by women, and it was a huge success last year. So we're seeking submissions for that. But there's always that stuff. The question I always have is, how do you make any money in this business? I mean, even when you get your play accepted, for example.
Yeah, that comes a little later.
We're getting to that.
Yeah, all right.
Sit tight.
All right,
So getting longer work developed is always more of a challenge. So for people who attend the BU graduate programs, MJ, Rick, and I all have, that's that's been a huge boon to me, because they continue to produce and they continue to develop and produce the work of graduates. So it's a unique, not unique, but a really beneficial model of, you come in with a new play and you work on it with their artistic staff, and eventually, they put on what they call a workshop production, which is really, very high quality with top-notch actors and production values and all that stuff, and they don't call it a world premiere, so you still can market that you can then take your play and continue to send it out, saying that it has not premiered yet. But I mean, it really is. It's more than a workshop production; it's a full production. So that's been a really important resource development opportunity for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the MFA program, because I want to ask what should be considered before choosing to apply to an MFA program, because that's a huge commitment financially in terms of time. So it's probably not a one-size-fits-all solution to play development. So what should I consider before I apply to an MFA program? Too late.
Just consider if you want to do it. If you want people in your I think I've already smart. So if you want people in your shit for 2 or 3 years, or 1 to 3 years, because I didn't go to BU. I went to Iowa, and let's see, why did I go to Iowa? I needed health insurance, and they had health insurance. I'm dead serious. I had gotten to a point where I was a nanny, and I was writing plays, and I was in my mid-20s. And I needed health insurance and a way to buy me some time so I didn't have to work during the day. And so Iowa, that's all I knew I wanted. And my teacher at Wesleyan, who was my first playwright teacher, was also a teacher's teacher, told me to apply to Iowa because she went to Iowa. So I applied. I didn't know that much about the program, to be quite honest. You should definitely know more than I did. I ended up in Iowa, and my mom was ready to drop me off. And I said, I think it was like 32 credits or something. And I said, that's an awful lot of credits for 2 years. And she goes, Kirsten, this is a 3-year program. 24 years old! Wow. She took that U-Haul truck and left me. But the good thing was, I was expected, what I knew that I wanted, though, was that I wanted a place to be able to write. And I think instinctively I knew that I needed to leave. I'm very, very close with my family. I think I needed a way to separate myself from my close friends and family, and Iowa certainly was that. Because I was in the middle of nowhere, and I was expected to write, at least start a full-length play a semester for 3 years. So by the end, you're supposed to have about 6 plays that you have in your back pocket. And a thesis, which is one of your plays, which is the play you perfect. So that was good because it was really, really rigorous. I wish, looking back, I had chosen a program that still had its TV and film section intact. By then, Iowa had one, and it dismantled theirs. I think just because it was a little difficult to always get teachers out in Iowa. So we had some really great ones, but often they'd stay with us for a while because I would just be like, please come back and teach our students. So I had some really great teachers, but they were all playwrights. And so looking back, I wish I had, because I knew how to do screenwriting and television writing right off the bat, getting out of school, so that I had that skill instead of it being this big looming thing that I hadn't done yet. But I knew that what the great thing about Iowa too was that they're trying to teach you how to behave well for yourself, not just to be a good playwright, but to get your work done in a rehearsal room. So you have the opportunity to they have a festival every year. It's not guaranteed that you are in the festival, but you have the opportunity to submit in December, and then they choose, they tier the productions. So you either get like a workshop production, and which, as you were saying, is really, really key. You have to be careful of not giving away your first production of your play, because then it's ineligible for all sorts of things that make it really, really juicy and happy for theaters. If you give away the world premiere status, that's giving away a whole lot. So this was a university, so that wasn't a problem. But so there was like you could have a almost full production, workshop production. I think you could have script in hand, and then a reading, and then a reading with script in hand, no set or lights or anything, and then just a reading sitting down in the rehearsal room. And the first year, everyone was like, I want a production, but by the third year, you realize that sometimes your play isn't ready for a production, and that is okay. And learning that about yourself as a writer is really, really important, that you're not just doing it because it's the best thing out, you think it's the best thing out there, that maybe your play should just be read, nothing, chairs, and that's the best thing that could be happen for the play. So learning how to develop yourself. Learning what your play needs at any given stage, because sometimes it doesn't need a full production. And with lights and everything, sometimes you need to sit down and take that thing apart. Back then, I also had money for student-run productions, so you were also, you weren't expected to, but there was certainly the opportunity that if you wanted to go out and produce yourself, not during the festival, but during the rest of the year. I suppose you could stay around the summer and do it, I think. Since I just got out of there after classes were over. I never spent more than 3 days in Iowa City if I didn't have to. I always came back. But that's because I also worked my way through school, and my job as a nanny was still intact here. So I was able to keep ties here. I always knew that winter break, spring break, and summer break, I had a full-time job here, and that's why I also came back. I went to a state school, so I didn't go to a private MFA program, and because I was a minority in Iowa, I don't know about black people in Iowa, I was on a minority scholarship, so, and actually they weren't that picky. Like my best friend there, who's a playwright, I'm sure he wouldn't care if I said this, was, he's a playwright named David Adjmi. He has a show right now in New York, with Stella Rep. He actually entered on some sort of minority scholarship as well, and he got there and they were like, David, we don't think you're a minority. He was like, I'm a Sephardic Jew. I am a minority. He was like, no, I'm not really in the theater. I don't think you're a minority. So they found more money for him because, they wanted to stay there. But they were willing to help people come from the coasts, rather, and stay there. So I left school without owing any loans. That's not my undergrad. No loans, no nothing. So that was also key. I think I made it, despite my choice being for healthcare, I did make some good choices.
So let's stay on the topic of money, because it is a hot topic. How do you support yourself financially, and where does playwriting fit into the equation? How do you balance free opportunities that may sound really juicy and helpful and creatively fulfilling versus ones that are paying but may not mean as much to you? Or do you find that being your choice at all?
Well, it's the making a living thing. Yes, I just have to laugh. How do you make a living as a playwright? I mean, I sort of do, I guess. I mean, I make, my day job is teaching, writing, playwriting and screenwriting in college. So, yes, it's a day job, although it's on my, creds as a writer, so maybe that sort of counts. But it's certainly not writing. So, I mean, I'm glad that I have it's not actually getting any writing done, although it's actually, it keeps me in the game because, I'm talking about writing all day, and I've actually gotten some I've gotten some things through my connections. One of my former students made a movie out of one of my plays. So, one of my screenwriting students. So that was...
Did they get an A?
What?
Did they get an A? I hope.
The class is over before. But I think he did. But, I mean, surprising boon has come out of my teaching. Opportunities sometimes come out of teaching. So that's been a good thing for me. I mean, I still feel like I'm never going to be, like a really, a real playwright until I can just write all the time. It's exhausting to work and try to fit writing in, and you have to fit it in because there isn't any money in it. So not like living on money. So I mean, there's infinite number of ways people have approached this problem. So I have I work part-time, and I also, have a family. I have small kids, and I married someone with a real job. So don't knock it. I actually know several playwrights who are
so marry well.
Marry well. I know playwrights, Kat Gaybridge, and other playwrights I know have gainfully employed spouses and have stayed home with kids or done more flexible work and fit writing in that way. It's yeah.
I think it's the same as how many actors do you know that make a living from acting?
Yeah.
And the actors that you met that Dawn mentioned that were coming in, they're kind of the lucky ones. But I mean, I'm friends with most of those guys, and it's a struggle for an actor to make a living in Boston or in New York or in any place. So, as a playwright, I don't look to make money necessarily when it comes my way, which is why I like the people in Racine, Wisconsin. When it comes, it's great. When it's something really nice, like, oh, I got this, or something, or it's just a nice thing. But I don't think there's, unless you're someone like Tony Kushner or something.
No, he doesn't make a living as a playwright either.
I don't like Tony Kushner.
Well, I mean, I usually teach. I've only done one class this semester, and next semester I won't have any classes. I write a lot of commission, so those sending out work to artistic directors who aren't going to do your stuff but might like you ends up paying off, and that they're like, well, you know what? We're not going to produce you. And this is also going to be a trap, though, for new writers or for writers of color or for women writers, because oftentimes they can get grants to fund you, give you a commission, but they won't necessarily put you in their season. That's a whole other thing. But I have been able to get, I live off commissions, and I live off of teaching sometimes. So that commission work has been a huge thing. So a lot of my work, my networking stuff is not actually in the room anymore, because our kids are exactly the same age. So I also have small children, so I'm not out schmoozing with people anymore. And I used to do a lot of residency programs to do developmental work on my plays. I can't do those anymore. So it's a lot of realizing, figuring out, people move around this business a lot, so figuring out where that artistic director went and sending it to their new theater. Figuring out where that theater manager went and sending it to that new theater. And then, 6 months down the line, so we have a commission for you, or would you like to work with us on X, Y, or Z? That's not necessarily that there's no money, it's not steady money. So, and that is a very rough life, especially when you have young kids, so marrying well is a good thing. But also knowing that, sometimes you will get a lot of stuff at once, and being able to not go out and buy an iPhone and an iPad with that money, but use it for other things, because you're not going to get that money in 6 months. So the life of a writer sometimes we don't like to talk about money in America, but I think that sometimes a lot of times people who write have also learned it's a weird way of being other in America, because I know from my experience I'm not the person going out and buying all those gadgets that the mainstream America does partake in. Or, what you buy as a writer is a computer, which seems like a gadget, but really it's that as a writer, you should be upgrading your computer every 2 years, because when that thing crashes on you, you have no livelihood. So it's stuff like that, as opposed to, I could buy an iPad, but then you can't write in that. So.
I want to bring up something that you brought up when we first met a month ago, which was when we were discussing what playwrights need, that both ladies agreed that daycare was incredibly important, because in the lifestyle of balancing a job and writing, being able to pass the kids along to somebody while you have time to see plays and write plays was incredibly important. I personally would like a cabin in Vermont for like a week or so, but that's just me. So
a cabin too.
We all share. Big share stores could invest. No, I'm going to open this up to questions from the audience. We'll start with Patrick.
Yeah, I actually wanted to see if I get a person to follow up a little bit more on the money aspect, because I think what's interesting is that you have experience around commissions and then regional theater productions and off-Broadway, and I think people don't even have a sense of, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but people have a sense of generally like how much money those generate for playwrights. I think people should know.
So usually when you get a regional production or an off-Broadway production, you get an advance, and that can range from a couple $1,000s to more than a couple $1,000s. So like $2,000 or $3,000 up to $8,000, $10,000, depending on how much they think they can make off of your play, and what tier you fall on in terms of your career. And that sounds great. However, that if your receipts don't make that much money, and you're not actually, I guess they could take some back, but they're not going to take it back. It's in your contract, you can't take it back. But you're not going to get any more money if they don't make more than that. So when I first started doing this, it was like, oh, cool! I got a lot. I got more than my friend did when he worked for this theater. And then when I think I made negative amount of money, and I was like, oh my god, I have liabilities. So you want to be careful if this should happen to you when you're negotiating contracts, figure out what time of year it is, if it's in during the holiday season. So I've gotten regional and off-Broadway productions, and I've said yes to them obviously because they were good theaters. However, both these productions happen to be at holiday time, so people are not necessary. One show sold okay, and one show sold pretty well, except for the fact that, it might have sold better if it was in the spring, where people were, I'm not a name playwright. I'm finally at the point where people, besides my friends, my mom, are going to come see the play. But I'm not going to fill the large houses right now. So you get an advance, then they give you the standard is like 6% of gross. But you have to be, when you're reading your contract, you're negotiating for yourself, and you don't have an agent, you need to make sure that they'll take out what they need to pay for their theater's operating costs out of what is brought into the theater. So those are all things you make sure you negotiate well, especially if it's a first production and you've never done it before and you don't have an agent. Getting someone, the dramaturgist skilled, will help you look over your project for you and help be your advocate, because theaters, they do want to make money. They really, really do. They want to keep their doors open and they want to be successful. And oftentimes the last person they're looking out for is you, the playwright. They don't really care that much if you make your rent or not. They care if the place sells for money. I mean, they care. So what I've been learning in the last few years is that there can be money in the theater. It's not necessarily that you don't always make it. It's not steady at all. And teaching isn't steady either, because oftentimes, especially playwriting, and in these times, playwriting is often considered a dying art. So it doesn't matter if you know how to teach it really well. If the school doesn't want to teach it, then you're not going to have a job. Especially in a place like Boston, which we think it's like, oh, there's so many colleges here. There are, and there are tons of MFA and PhDs who can do your job. And there are tons of people in the English department who can do your job, and they don't have to hire you as a freelance playwright to teach the course. So in that respect, teaching is great, but you're always, I don't know, I feel like you're hustling. If you decide to have a baby one semester.
Yeah. I lost a job that way.
So teaching is good, but it's also not necessarily the steady thing that you'd hope it would be, and that writing is the scary, unknown quantity. They're both unknown.
There's not a lot of tenure track playwriting. So adjuncts are, they're on the knife's edge as far as, classes don't always fill and run, and then you don't have a class to teach, and you don't have a salary that semester, and you always stand to be cut if things get tight. So,
but if you do have a day job, though.
Yeah, you have a real job.
I do. And I have no kids, thank God. Yeah, I mean, you find the time to write when you can write, and I don't plan on making money from it, but that's what I do to pay the bills. So. I like being in a house.
Yeah. Houses are good.
That's what I need.
But my sister is also a writer, and she has a normal day job, and when she just switched her day job to a very lucrative one. I was like, wow, you know. But what she would do often is she would negotiate with them. She knew that they wanted her there, and she was a commodity for her day job, and she was good at what she made sure she was good at what she did, and so she was often able to negotiate, like, for a month, I'm gonna need to leave at 3, and then she would make sure when she left at 3, she went to the library and wrote. Not check her email or go to the gym or that was right in time. So she was able to negotiate, keep her health insurance, keep her day job, keep her way of rent, and stuff like that. So there are ways to do that, and she was able to do that a couple times. She did that when she was in getting her MFA, but then she also did it when she realized she needed to finish this book to be able to submit it somewhere. And so she was able to say, look, for this amount of time, I'm doing this, I'll be back. So there are different ways to maneuver. I've never had a day job, a regular day job. I've been in the team, but I've never had a 9-to-5 office job. But I've heard people have been able to negotiate.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the best temp jobs I've ever had. I mean, I do editorial type work also. And some of the best jobs I ever had where I had to show up, but they didn't have anything for me to do.
Yeah.
So I just got out my notebook. I wrote a lot of plays that way. I'm getting paid.
In the back row.
Yeah, so let's say a local theater wants to do a full-length play of yours, okay? Or a musical of yours. And you're negotiating on behalf of yourself. I'd love to have your opinion on how you would negotiate. Would you base it on the size of the theater, the cost of the tickets, the length of the run? Obviously you want them to make money, and you want any theater that takes a risk on something that no one's ever heard of before, to me, is a great theater. I think one of the problems with Boston theaters right now, I think every equity theater in this town should have one slot open for a play or a musical written by a local playwright. That's my opinion, but I would love to see that day when they would get to that point. But that being said, let's say somebody says, okay, we love your play. Rick, we love your play, we want to produce your play. What would Rick, acting as his own agent, what would you expect I'll just give you throw an example out there. There's say a theater company that seats, maybe a theater that seats 120, ticket price $25. They're going to do a nine performance run. What would you think would be a reasonable, acceptable guesstimate on what you would expect to be paid for your work?
Well, that's,
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but because I want to talk, that's really the bare bones. It's called show business, and you want to make some money, but you also want to make sure that it's a hit.
I think the Dramatists Guild has pretty standard contracts. So if you're a member of the Dramatists Guild, you can run any contract by them, and they'll give you a lot better guidance than probably I could.
So the idea, basically on what performance rights kind of an idea?
What's that?
Performance rights kind of an idea?
Everything.
The whole deal?
Compensation, right, the rights that you sign over to them, which, are many, and because there's a whole issue about, I forget what it's called now, but when theaters premiere a new work, there's often, they specify that because they've participated in developing the work and bringing it to the stage, they want a cut of a certain number of subsidiary rights, yes,
right,
of future productions.
Exactly, right.
So, and that's quite controversial at the Dramatists Guild, and there's specific guidelines that they have for when that's fair and not. So there's all sorts of things like that, and I believe they have standard contracts based on the type of theater that you're dealing with, and they'll also give you specific advice.
But what I would watch out for is what actors they have access to, the theater company. If you're going to have a world premiere or a premiere at all, and it gets reviewed, those reviews don't go away.
Oh yeah, you want to make sure that.
So you want to make sure that you protect yourself when you do your homework about that production and what they call that production. I would figure out.
That should be in your contract.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Definitely about the subsidiary rights, so that you're not signing away 2-3% of what you could make on the play later. But sometimes, I think it's true. Most writers don't do it for the money. So if you have, like, if a theater company approached me and said, we saw one of your 10-minute plays 3 years ago, and we'd love you to make a full length out of it, and we don't have a lot of money, but we really just like to play. I don't think I'd go nail them to the wall in terms of trying to figure out what I could get.
But I mean, if they're filming their seats and they're making some money off it, would you consider basing it on the size of the house, for example?
That's why,
There's these gray areas,
then there's kind of a standard 5 to 6% of the gross, so that you can kind of figure out. You can just make it gross receipts, and then so you're taking off that, and that doesn't matter. Or if they want to pay a flat fee, you can kind of calculate, what the ticket price is, how big the house is, and what you expect that they're going to sell. Like, you do like 75% of a 100-seat house at $10 a head,
right?
And you say, okay, you're going to pay me this much per night,
right?
Fill in the math.
I'm thinking back to a fantastic class that I took at Emerson College called Intro to Arts Management, which was taught by Julie, in putting together a hypothetical budget for a show. The formulas were based on so many factors that, short of having Microsoft Excel in front of me, and also Julie over my shoulder helping me along with it, I could never think to fathom any part of it. So it's clear that there are so many factors that go into every part, and that there's more certainly to it than just good writing.
Which certainly a musical would cost a hell of a lot more than a straight.
Yeah, my hypothetical company only did straight plays with 4 actors each.
More or less, no secret.
I used to always think that what I wanted was a theater to do my work. And now it's like, okay, well, how much development can we do before the thing goes up? Do I get a workshop? And you'd be surprised at how many people are like, no, we don't want to do that. Even when they think that they have a lot of money, because it is a lot of money to get actors in a room, the heat has to go on, all that kind of stuff that you don't think about. You think, oh, well, they have tons of space. Someone has to be in the building that's designated to be in the building for whatever, depending on where it is, like the college, what do you think? There's so many spaces. And the amount of cost to run that thing just empty is astronomical. I can't talk about that. I have no expertise in that. But I do know that what I've learned in the last few years is that just doing a reading is a lot more expensive than I thought. So it doesn't mean we as a playwriting community stop asking for them, but we do need to consider that they do cost a lot of money. You can't necessarily have actors come in because they want to help you out. They're giving their time. They're giving sometimes they would be giving a week where they're not going on auditions and they're not doing other things because they're helping you develop your play. So they have to be compensated. And then you could argue whether or not you need a director. I know as a writer I do need it. I think I'm not a director. I'm just a writer. Like people are like, oh, you can self-produce. That's not me. People tell me that. I don't like doing that. I don't like it. So I would need a director and all that kind of stuff. And those all cost a lot more money than I pay.
Let's take one more question here.
This was kind of linked to that. Like, how often, like, sometimes when you do a workshop production, or how many of you have been involved in like a collaborative play where the performers are hired and you basically helping with them to write the play? Have any of you done that kind of playwriting? And if so, then how the performers or the collaborators then, how do you deal with the ownership of the actual final material? Is it I know that as far as copyright, if you're a hired hand, from my understanding of reading copyright, whoever paid you owns the copyright if they hired and commissioned you. But I'm not sure. Is that true? Like if they're like buyouts versus owning the copyright on your own play. You know, I've done it once where I've done a royalty per show, or buyouts where they just bought the whole play because it was collaborative.
It's been way too long since I've been able to do that, just because of the reasons that you were saying. It's too expensive to find a group, and I'm not affiliated enough with one theater company to be able to have access to actors and space and that sort of thing. It's been a while for me, ladies.
I have done a couple of projects where I've been brought in, but I'm definitely part of a collaborative. There was like a choreographer, and there was a musician, and there was. But let's see, the theater company owned the actual production. I do have an agent, and they negotiated that I had rights to the raw material in case I ever wanted to go back and rewrite something. Given that it was the theater company did all these interviews, and then we put them into a community piece. And so the theater company owns the piece, and they can remount it. There was a certain statute of limitations where they could remount it for a certain number of years. I don't know. But because I was interested in the raw material, I had ownership over the raw material, which I actually never went back and did anything with. But yeah, no, the theater company did own that production. I couldn't. But that's the thing, though, is that because theater costs so much to make, I think there's a huge trend now in co-productions and theater companies getting together to put together pieces of theater. So I don't think there was ever a moment where if I had been talking to someone not in Boston, this was a Boston-based piece, not in Boston, in New Hampshire or Rhode Island or something, and said, I really want to remount this. I don't think that theater company would have been like, no. We would have had to renegotiate and refigure out. But I find that a lot of times, especially now, because it costs so much to do, theaters are interested in co-collaborating together and putting the resources together to do productions, as opposed to always just wanting to own and only not share.
And the Dramatist Guild has a couple boilerplate contracts available, particularly when it comes to music and lyrics. And it's all territory that I'm too terrified to touch. but it's available there.
So you could just go online for that.
I'm not sure how accessible it is to non-members, but I know that it's available as a resource. I think it's drumtheskill.com perhaps.
It's $90 a year, I think, if you're not.
If you're not a student.
Equity investment. So,
And we'll take one last question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. It's awesome. The question I had was really more about not so much the production end of it, but the work ethic and how you structure your time and how you motivate yourself to work, to write.
Deadlines.
Having to have it ready for class or something as well, which is me. I always find that I want to write when I can't write. So I'll be at work or I'll be on the tee. A really crowded scene. I'm like, oh, it's a really good idea. It's a really good line. And I'll just keep saying it over and over. But you sort of have to force yourself. In the program that I'm in with MJ, we had 2 different classes where we have to be writing 2 different plays. And it always was the case where when I had to write this play, I wanted to write this play. I gotta go to this play. And then I get that one done, and then now I have to, so you just have to find it. I mean, it's just a weird, whatever the inspiration and the time collide is what it.
You have to keep making appointments to, and keep, what is it, I think some writer put it cleverly, but you have to keep making it, you have to keep showing up and hoping that the inspiration shows up at the same time. Or eventually the inspiration, if you keep showing up, the inspiration will eventually show up at the same time. But yeah, it's being responsible to a deadline or something.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a commission or you're not working on something with the, one way to put outside pressure on yourself is to join a writing group or something. Because I know if I had not been in Rhombus, I would have done so little writing over the last few years. Where you just have to show up every so often with something in hand and just do it.
I put the responsibility on other people sometimes. I designed my own motivation when I decided, because I wasn't in an MFA program yet, and I really wanted to practice, and the only way to force myself to practice was to write every day. So I was like, you know what, Susan Mary Parks did it. I'll write 365 plays in 365 days. And I had this one camper from a day camp that I worked at 2 years ago who would text me at like 11:50 p.m. and be like, MJ, I hope you're writing. And that was motivation enough for me to be like, okay, so this one's going to be a short one, but I have to sit here and do it.
You'd start at 11:50.
Sometimes. You won't see those in 10 plays.
Well, excellent. Thank you guys. What I would like, everybody got a handout, hopefully when they came in the door. There's some resources, local resources for playwrights on those handouts there. So we are done with the sort of formal portion of the evening. If our playwrights can hang out, we'd love for you guys to hang out. You guys can pick their brains for a few minutes. And yeah, talk to each other, ask questions. If you made a friend in the audience, keep talking. And we can stay here for maybe the next half hour or so, get some chatting done. If things are really rolling, maybe we'll go somewhere else and continue to chat with food. Thanks guys. Thanks.